Okay, everyone. So, a reminder of why we're all here. We're here to discuss best practices, basically, in B2B sales. And the sections that we have covered already included gaining an understanding of what a sales team, what their effort entails, what it includes, which is another way of also looking at the responsibilities that remain with you if you're a founder of the company. So sales team and you are always still involved in the sales effort. From there, we discussed a tactic for putting together a sales message. We discussed what is a sales message and also how is that different from a marketing message. Then last week, we went into the components of a sales process, and then we kind of clicked behind each one of the components to see more detail. We gained an appreciation for how granular, that means how detailed, the process can be behind each one of the particular components. Then we had a quick discussion about what kind of reporting is useful to bring into the environment of a sales effort. And that brings us to my favorite part now, which is the next two bullets. My favorite part is the last bullet, but the next bullet takes us in the direction of the last bullet. So basically, we will spend a little bit of time, not too much, speaking about wish lists. So I define them in a particular way. It's just my way of defining a wish list. And we'll talk about what that means. And then outreach, which is the process of taking the names in the wish list and contacting them in the attempt to sell them something. Okay, so for anyone who is able to speak or anyone who's able to type into the chat section, do you have any questions about the past sections? Anything that you would like to quickly review? Maybe you want to check your comprehension, or maybe you have a fresh question. So whether you understood something and you want some clarification, or if you did not understand anything, if you want some clarification, or if you have any fresh new questions that may have come into mind after the last couple of webinars. So feel free to ask now. Okay, so no questions in the chat? Okay, if nothing, then let's talk about what is a wish list. So probably something that's easier to understand is a target list. If I say target list, what do you think it means? Let me modify that name. Target client list. What does that mean? Target client list.
Okay, the answer from Srijan is ideal clients. Even I think I can hear him typing.
I don't know.
Okay, Svetlana, clients we want to reach.
Yeah. Okay. So a target list of clients, a list of target clients is a simple list of companies you want to contact to begin selling something to them. So you are targeting them with your product or your service. And if the list had 10 companies on there, that would be a target list. If the list had 30 companies on there, that would be a target list. But it would not be a wish list the way I define wish list. So usually, unless there's one condition which is met, if that target list of 30, which seems short, if that target list of 30 included every possible company that fits your client definition, then it would be the wish list. So if you notice, the difference is any list could be a list of target clients. For example, if you know that you are going for candy companies, companies that make candy, then we can think really quickly about the popular and famous ones, right? Like Snickers and what else? Twix and M&Ms, okay? So that's a list of 3. And we created that list because they were at the top of our mind. So that list of 3 target clients, so Twix, Snickers, and M&Ms, if they were separate companies, then that would already be a list of target clients. But it would not be a wish list because it lacks the effort of creating a comprehensive and complete. Comprehensive, you guys, means that it does not leave anything out. Comprehensive means complete, the full complete list of companies that fit your client definition. Then that is a wish list when you have everyone included, every company included. Okay, so that brings us back to the topic of client definition, which is one of the main components of the sales process, if you remember. And typically, client definition is made up of characteristics that are measurable. That means things that we can see empirically. So there's data that we can check in order to measure the characteristics of that particular company, in order to compare the characteristics of that company to whatever your client definition is. So sometimes you have industry verticals, for example. This is something that you can see from outside observation. What vertical is Snickers in? It's in the, what's the word? Candy, or more like food products industry vertical. Okay, so that we can observe from outside observation. Size of a company. We can find data on how big the size of the company is. Then there are other things which might be characteristics that define our client, but these things may not be measurable. Maybe these are things we have to get into a conversation and start asking questions in order to find out, the answers to some of these questions. Okay, so the client wish list is a goal. It is a necessity in any sales effort, because as I said before, it is the complete list of every possible company that would fit your client definition. So it is going to mean a lot of work. So creating a wish list of target clients is a very difficult part of the experience you're going to have launching a sales effort, because it requires a lot of hard research. And if you don't have a great client definition yet, then it's also going to include working on your client definition. Once you have the client definition, then you treat each one of the characteristics as filtering factors. What do I mean by filtering factors? When you know how to measure, how to check, to see if a company is fitting your client definition, what you begin with first is a global list that you filter down to your wish list. And what do I mean by global list? Literally, the globe, the entire planet. Every company in the planet, then filtered down according to your factors. So what do I mean by factors? Well, I've already mentioned industry vertical, okay? To make a wish list, you take every single company in the world and you see which ones fit the industry verticals that you care about, the ones that are in your client definition. So industry verticals you have banking, you have automotive, you have energy, healthcare, media, real estate, retail, technology, telecommunications, transport. I mean, there's dozens, right? Or hundreds of industry verticals. Normally, you pick about 2 or 3 or maybe 5, and you commit to them. So the answer within your client definition can sound something like, we will address real estate, and we will address telecommunications, and we will address transportation and logistics. These are industry verticals that we will focus on. These are inside my client definition. So now you can already filter every single company in the planet and leave out banking and leave out automotive and only keep real estate, telecommunications, transportation. Okay, so that could be one factor. And you continue filtering that result by your next filtering factor, which could be size. Okay, not everyone has to focus on industry verticals. These are not obligatory, these factors that I have here. They just tend to be common to most companies. Okay, same thing with size. Size may be irrelevant to you. In fact, and that goes from company to company, whether it's relevant to you or not. And even within the topic of size, everyone's defining size in a different way, the way that's relevant to them. Because for some of your business models, the only thing that may matter is the revenue of that company. And you measure according to revenue. For other business models, maybe revenue has nothing to do with it. You're looking at how many people work at that company, such as headcount. And when you're looking at size, you tell yourself sometimes, I won't work with anyone smaller than this, only as of this size. Or sometimes you're working with a range. So no one smaller than this, but not bigger than this. Okay, so it's pretty easy to guess why you wouldn't work with companies smaller than a certain size. But if you're working with a range, so not smaller than this, but not bigger than this, and your range is right in between, why would you also limit yourself on the upper end of that? Can someone think of a reason why you would not work with companies beyond a certain size? Natural instinct is to just work with the biggest, but maybe experience or an educated guess tells you not smaller than 5, but not bigger than 50. Why would you limit yourself and not work beyond 50?
Maybe we don't have the capacity for it.
The reason is going to be internal. You don't have the capacity for it. So you know the size of your team and the capacity of your team, and you know the kind of funding that you will have for the next 18 months. So maybe you know that you won't have the capacity to properly deal with those kinds of clients. So you know your reasons, but then you live up to them, meaning you put them into action and filter out companies that are bigger than a certain size. Sometimes the answer to that question, you guys, is that your product is a great product for companies of a certain size. Starting at a particular point, then they have big enterprise solutions available to them. And maybe your niche, your strategy is precisely to address everyone who would rather go with this affordable solution that does a lot for them. Maybe you're the first one to admit when a company is enormous, they are better off with enterprise solutions that are tailored for them. Maybe that's the reason as well. You don't want to have a tailored product, but rather a standard product. And if experience tells you, or an educated guess tells you, that after a certain size of a company, they have high probability to look for an expensive tailored solution, then you're the first ones to say, not for me. I will not burn my time going after those companies that have such high probabilities of looking for a tailored enterprise solution. The money I'm going to make is in selling the standard product to people who are satisfied with the standard product. Okay, so locations might be another sizing factor. Sorry?
Can I, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, you can, of course.
Where can we find such a database of all these world companies with all these filters, size, revenue, etc.?
Yeah,
How to find it?
Yeah, that's the next slide. And that's why I mentioned that we have some background noise, someone, a phone call that we can hear in the background. So if someone can mute that, please. So the next slide speaks about that, or I think it's the slide after that. But I did mention something already, you guys. Creating the wish list is an enormous amount of work. And I'll go ahead and mention already, it might be more work than you are capable of doing. But let's speak about the ideal first, and then worry about whether it's achievable at all, whether the wish list is achievable. Okay, so speaking about the size factor for other business models, locations is what matters. So not the kind of money that the company makes or how many people work there, but you might have, for example, a collaboration tool, a SaaS product collaboration tool that makes sense when a company has thousands of locations spread out, and instead of a centralized location where everyone is in the same building. Then there's fleet size. Some of you might just care that they have 100 trucks, between 100 and 2,000 trucks in their fleet. Okay. Another filtering factor, geography. That one's pretty easy. Your experience tells you that you are most effective in Western Europe, or your business plan tells you we are going to concentrate on these 5 countries. So little by little, the global list gets trimmed down and trimmed down and trimmed down. The last thing I have on this slide is that industry vertical size and geography, that's not all. There could be another factor which is specific to you, something that is just completely specific to your approach. We already mentioned that neither industry nor size or geography are obligatory either. If you decide size is completely irrelevant to us, you don't use that filter, okay? However, when thinking of something specific, such as something specific to your particular model, the question is, can I measure that? Can I measure that through outside observation? So for example, you might tell yourself, okay, another filtering factor is that my wish list will be made out of companies that are friendly toward innovations. Yeah, that's legitimate. We would be having a higher rate of success probably if we were only addressing companies that have a high level of motivation for innovative things. So if we could say innovation from 5 to 10, but not innovation from 4 to 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. But you can't really measure that, can you? From outside observation. Or it's dangerous. You might think you have a way to measure that, but then you would be excluding a lot of companies that are perfectly happy and willing to look at innovations, but they never demonstrated it before today, in any overt public way. So what do you do with the filtering factors that you cannot measure from outside observation? You have to leave them out of your wish list creating exercise, wish list creation exercise, but you still save those questions. You can ask them in your very first conversation with that potential client. these become qualification questions, but they engage during the outreach stage, or maybe even as late as the discovery meeting. So don't throw away those specific factors that cannot be measured empirically. That means that the quantity can't be measured through outside observation. Just save them and convert them into qualification questions for outreach or for the discovery meeting. Okay, so I'm getting closer now to the question that we received, but are there any other questions right now before turning away from this slide? Okay, in that case, I would like to mention something related called the sweet spot. So basically, there's client definition, and you would hope that your client definition and your sweet spot are aligned. So what is the sweet spot? Basically, the sweet spot means the place where your chance of success is the best. So what I mean by place is imagine the combination of all those factors. They produce an area where, as long as you stay in this area within the parameters of all these filtering factors, your chances of success are the highest. But what does that mean? You know, success. I always like to break down things for you in a way that maybe we can measure it, we can engineer it. So what to look for? That's what this slide is about. Imagine that you had the luxury, the advantage, not everyone does, but if you had the advantage of experience with clients already. So if you have a company and you already have 2-3 years of experience with clients, you have had clients, you have clients today, then if you have somehow not until now had a truly complex way to define your client, then this would be the time. This would be the time to look behind your shoulder, look at the past. Look at the past of the clients you have had, and maybe make 3 lists for each one of these bullets. Make a list for high retention, make a list for good profit margin, and make a list for good feedback. And then if you have had until today 25 clients, rank those 25 clients in order of retention, good margin, high feedback. So what does retention mean? Let's say the number of months that they have remained your client. Okay, so rank everyone. The client that stayed with you for 1 month or 2 weeks would be at the bottom of that list. The client that has been with you for 18 months is at the top of that list. Let's imagine that, okay? And then there's margin. There's the profitability that you get from working with that particular client, with each one of the 25 clients. So remember what we mentioned about that maybe you would not go for companies larger than a certain amount. And one of you said, we don't have the capacity for it, possibly. That's why we would not go for companies of a certain size. There's also the other end of the spectrum, companies smaller than a certain size. Usually the reason we would not work with companies smaller than a certain size is probably this reason. The bill would be too small, and the amount of work that your team puts into it is probably the same than the middle ground ones. Sometimes even the same as the biggest ones, the biggest clients that you have. So naturally, your profit is maybe nothing sometimes. And when you begin a startup, you should make a good educated guess about, with what kinds of companies I might make the best margin, but you never know until you try. So there's no shame in if you have already had small clients and you lost money on them, or you just barely covered your costs. But the lesson is important so that you simply don't repeat it. It doesn't happen to you again. You learn to exclude the kind of client which is not going to leave you a good margin. But anyway, coming back to our point, you could rank your 25 clients you have had historically from best margin to lowest margin. And then the same thing with feedback. Assuming you have some kind of mechanism that collects feedback from clients, if it's based on stars, just to simplify it, then rank it from 5-star to 0 stars. Okay, so what do you do then? The exercise I recommend is maybe take the top 10 from each one of these columns and then see which companies repeat themselves throughout the 3 columns and cluster those companies. Take all the companies that rank anywhere from 1 to 10 on each one of those columns and then extract the common denominators from that group of companies. In other words, list everything that they have in common. And then we come back to the factors. You might see that the companies that were in the top 10 for each one of these, they all happen to be in these 2 or these 3 industry verticals. They all happen to be between here and here on size. And they all happen to be from particular geographies, perhaps. And you might extract another filtering factor and another filtering factor, which you see, oh, that's measurable as well. So that to me is your sweet spot. Which clients are you keeping? On top of that, which ones are making you the most money? And on top of that, which ones are leaving you great feedback? My question to you would be, why would you ever want to work with anyone else before you acquire all of the companies that belong to that definition? Okay, so I wouldn't worry about companies outside of my sweet spot until I have conquered every single company in my sweet spot. Then you would have a problem. Then you would have a problem. How do I grow from here? But please speak up and tell me, anyone in this conversation who already has almost every company that fits within their sweet spot. This is nothing against you, but my guess is that most of them are still out there waiting for you to acquire them.
Because
okay.
we need to build up a portfolio.
Yeah, your collection of customers, that's called a portfolio. And right now, some of them might be more profitable for you, some of them less profitable for you. Your destiny, your future should be to get more of the profitable ones, to get more of the high retention ones, and get more of the ones that are happy to work with you, based on a particular definition of what that kind of client looks like. Okay, so something important just to squeeze in here. Imagine that you go to a trade show and you have a stand and people come to you. There's pros and cons to going to trade shows. It's not all just a party. In fact, I usually take very seriously the disadvantages that trade shows present. They're expensive. That's one thing if you're going to set up a stand. But one of the things the thing I dislike the most about going to trade shows is that the traffic is unfiltered. You get all kinds of junk. I don't mean to call people junk, but you get a lot of people coming to you that are time wasters. To me, it's already a time waster if they are outside of the definition of my sweet spot. So when you go through this exercise and you buy in to the exercise that you are conducting, and you think to yourself, okay, let me look back into my history and extract what my sweet spot is. Let me convert that into filtering factors, and then let me create my wish list. If that wish list is truly complete, comprehensive, it includes everyone that fits your client definition, and your client definition is aligned with your sweet spot, then In my opinion, that would give you all of the power to be at a trade show, and when someone comes to your stand and says, I've heard of your product, it's an awesome product, I know that already, and where do I sign? I want to have it. Then this exercise would give you the courage or the power to say, thank you very much. I'm very glad that you're here. By the way, I would have 3 quick questions for you. What industry are you in? Okay, noted. And how big are you in terms of headcount? Or how big are you in terms of locations that your company has? Okay, you have 75 locations, great. And last question, where are you located? What part of the world? Okay, you are in Western Europe. Great, you're in Switzerland. Fantastic. If that person did not fit your client definition, you would have the strength to tell them, listen, we appreciate that you came here. At the moment, we are not working with companies like yours. Let me take your card and put you on the list so I can come back to you as soon as we open into that particular industry vertical, or until we are working with that particular size, or until we are working in that country. So if you take it seriously, that why waste your time with companies that make you less money, or you can't retain as easily, or they're never happy, they leave bad feedback. Why would you ever accept someone? Even when they say, where do I sign? I wouldn't. You do this enough times, signing the wrong people, and naturally you would learn to reject them. Okay? So that's the importance of the wish list. I name it as a major component of the foundation of a sales process, and it's for that reason. The wrong client can destroy your company, basically. Before I jump off of this slide, I have retention and I have feedback. This might sound like the same thing to you guys, maybe, because why would you keep a client that doesn't like you? So keeping is retention and liking is feedback, right? High feedback. Can anyone think of a situation where you retain clients even though they don't like you? They give you bad feedback, but you retain them. That would be a sick relationship, and that could actually happen. Why would that hold? How could you retain clients that basically don't like you? Any ideas? What would keep a client working with you even though they don't like you? Any ideas?
Vladislav is writing legal contract.
It could be a contract. Yeah, you're right.
Maybe
They might
to save some kind of partnership with another client or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So good. Those are all very good ideas. In fact, it's not the ones I usually think of, and they were really clever ones. Maybe I just think too simple sometimes. But if your product was the only one, right? If you are the only product on the market that does that, then you would retain anyone because they have no choice. But maybe they hate you. They hate your customer service. So also in the examples you guys gave just a moment ago, how high is that risk? That risk is enormous. You might have lots of clients, high retention, good margin, bad feedback. The moment that a competitor finally makes the product that competes with you on an identical basis, because of that low feedback, you would lose everyone overnight and you would be in a very bad situation. But if you know that group of clients that, in addition to high retention and good margin, give you the high feedback, and you concentrate only on acquiring those, then you are also not afraid of your competition when your feedback score is high. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now, as promised, where do I find that tool that gives me all the filters was one of the questions. I wish it was that easy, you guys. That would be your first priority, to find a tool that brings the global list of companies on Earth And then you're able to say these, these industry verticals, this size range, and it has all those details. Do you want revenue, or do you want fleet size, or do you want headcount, or do you want locations? And then regional. And then if you can think of a fourth filter and a fifth filter. I can hear some background. I don't know if it's a question or if someone should mute themselves. Okay, so if it's a question, speak louder because it wasn't very easy to hear.
It was not a question.
Okay, all right. So you guys, that would be the ideal. Yes, to just press a button and it produces your wish list. But normally it's going to be a lot of work because it's going to be a research project. A research project where you literally ask yourself, do I have that talent myself? Am I a famous, not famous, but was I a really highly rated researcher when I was young at school? Because then that spirit is still in me. I know where to look. I know how to go further. I can read through things and determine faster than normal people if it's relevant or not relevant to my research project. So it is a skill in itself. It requires a particular mentality of people who just love to research. So there are people out there. And if that talent is not in your organization, then you would need to find it somewhere. Or getting back to the press a button and it solves all of my problems solution, there are services which will sell you lists and they will be very expensive. The question with the services that sell you a list or someone in-house that does the research, the question is always, how close do they bring me to the 100% accuracy? Because the wish list, it's an ideal, because the difference between wish list and just a target list is the fact that it's comprehensive. So that perfection is probably impossible, to have a list which is 100% of everyone. But I always say perfection is impossible, but excellence is not. So in the attempt to reach perfection, which is 100%, you would never have a way of knowing, do I have 100%? You could be sitting on 92%, but you would never really know. You would just hope that your process is an excellent process, the best talent, the best ideas that you could put into the research project. That's excellence. It's the attempt to reach perfection. You just want to make sure your process is excellent, okay? So the thing that the research is going to produce is that it tells you the size of your market. So basically, it's the result of having a wish list is so that we can put it into action and start calling people, but it also helps you to prepare to start reaching out to people, in the sense that knowing the size of your market for the sales effort is different from knowing the size of your market for looking for investors. Because when you are approaching an investor, you have a slide which is trying to make it interesting for them, and you tell them the size of the market is $4 billion. Okay? For the sales team, we don't care about these $4 billion. The size of the market to us needs to be a number of companies on my list. So if everyone that fits your client definition and your sweet spot definition, if the answer is there are 102,097 companies, that's the size of the market in terms of what we care about in the sales team. Okay, so so basically you're able to have conversations with investors, for example, where you tell them how you built your wish list and the number of companies we need to acquire and the kind of investment you need to hire the sales team that can address that list of clients. When you have your wish list and you know the number of companies you need to acquire, the immediate step that comes next is to ask yourself, to give yourself a goal. What do I mean by a goal? 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or 18 months. You take the number of your wish list, 1,897, whatever I may have said before, and the next step is to declare 12 months, for example, as a goal. The goal is 12 months in which we consume this wish list, in which you consume that wish list at a steady rate every week. What I mean by steady rate is that we will reach out to the decision maker at each one of the companies on my wish list, and it will be at the same number every week. So if it's 20 per week, or if it's 40 per week. And once you decide that, you can do the math, put it all together, the number of companies on your wish list, the number of months you want to take for the project of reaching out to all of them at a steady rate. You do the math, and that tells you how many per week is this. And that helps you to ask for the number of salespeople that should belong in your sales team. Because the weekly number, the last step, is to ask yourself, what is the capacity of one salesperson? Can one salesperson do the complete weekly number? Or does that need 2 salespeople? Or does that need 3 salespeople? So the answer to that may come from experience. The question is, what is the capacity of one salesperson? The answer to that may come from experience, or it might require an educated guess at the beginning. Don't be afraid if that number is low. So usually you think that salespeople need to work with enormous numbers, such as reaching out to 80 companies in one day. The question is, how much responsibility does the salesperson have? Do they also have to do the client demos? Do they also have to create the presentations? The proposals, the cost proposals? Do they also need to create the contract? And do they also need to chase the contract? That means do all the follow-up work to get the contract back signed. That's a full package salesperson. And considering all of the work that comes after the outreach event, then you might be dealing with very low numbers, like 10 per week, per head, per person. Because then from the 10, maybe 3 of them allow you to have a deeper conversation. From the 3, maybe 1 allows you to send a proposal. And out of 3 proposals that you send, 3 contracts that you send, you're able to sign 1. Okay, so that's one person working 3 weeks to sign 1 deal and having reached out to 30, if I remember all the math that we did, 30 companies. And with no more capacity than to reach out at 10 per week. If your educated guess tells you, yes, that's the human capacity, because all of the work, which is the follow-up, and conducting the discovery meeting and so on, as I mentioned before, don't be afraid of that number being quite low. The only thing is that number might be a disappointment. You might tell yourself, oh my gosh, 3 weeks of work to sign 1 deal. And if it's only 10 per week, then that's 100 weeks to reach out to 1,000 companies. The facts are the facts, guys. But when you have the facts and you have this whole complete picture we just painted, it can sound a lot more respectable if you're speaking to an investor. You have all your facts and your reasoning determined. You can make that argument. If you think you can get the money to get the sufficient number of hires, salespeople, to raise that, to boost the productivity. If 3 weeks of work gets you 1 deal and you know you need 3 deals, well, then you need to boost the capacity by 3. Okay, so let me skip over the rest, you guys, because we should jump into the outreach stage. The rest of that had a little bit more to do with sales process. So the answer to your question is the research that you do, you strive for excellence. Or if you buy a list, then your worry is, how good is this list? But the moment you finally have the wish list, if you have some kind of sense that tells you, we seem to have 85% of what we need here, or if you have some kind of sense that tells you, we probably have anywhere from 90 to 90% here, that's pretty good. That's big enough of a list that you can move on to outreach and get to work with it. Okay, so now let me contrast quickly to what it looks like when you don't have a wish list. We already mentioned before that you might have a list of the first companies that came to mind, the famous ones, basically. Or in the absence of that completely, you might be operating in an opportunistic way. All of the customers that you have had already, they came through opportunities. They were inbound leads, they were people that you met at the trade show, and so on. And that's a great thing. I mean, good that you've been able to acquire clients that way. When we turn to the topic of outreach, it's about losing our dependence on just opportunities that come up. People in your network, that's also opportunism. Those are just opportunities that are there, so why wouldn't you take them? But an organized outreach towards the companies in a wish list, the point of that is to take out the unpredictability out of it. It's not easy to predict what our rate will be by depending on our list of contacts, or depending on inbounds, or depending on people that come to us at trade shows and insist that they want to work with us. Okay, so that brings us to the topic of outreach, which is my favorite topic. Putting everything together where we have a sales message, we have a wish list. The wish list is aligned with our sweet spot. We have a definition of the kind of decision maker we want to go for. That's the bullets that I skipped over quickly earlier, because it speaks to that part of the sales process, one of the components of the sales process. In addition to client definition, also a definition of the kind of job role that you are looking for inside the organization, whether it's a VP of marketing or a VP of HR or a head of or a CTO or whatever that may be. Now you're ready to reach out. Okay. Okay, so any remaining questions about the wish list, or anything that you would like to see in particular as we are getting ready to speak about reaching out to potential clients in our wish list? Okay, if nothing, then outreach, when you're reaching out to companies on your wish list, it's always cold by definition. What does cold mean? What do I mean by cold when I say cold outreach or cold calling? We can't hear anyone?
So Vladislav is saying they are not going to like that you are calling.
They are not going to like that you are calling? Okay, it's unfortunate that we already think that way. that we think that it is automatically disliked. Okay, but we're going to address that during this conversation. Maybe to neutralize that answer, I appreciate the answer, but to neutralize it, we're going to say cold means that they were not expecting it. That's what it means. It was not warm, meaning it was someone in your network already, or someone in your network who already told someone, hey, you should have a call with a guy who's really friendly at a really cool company. That would then not be cold anymore because there's a warm introduction that happened before. Okay, but it's already good to know that there are these negative aspersions out there regarding cold outreach, because that's why this is a fun part of the discussion.
Yeah, Maria just also wrote, you didn't have contact with those people, so they don't expect you to call them.
That's right. They don't expect you to call them. That's the point. So I've written calling here, but it's not only calling. It can also be writing. If you remember from the sales process section of last week of our discussion, we were looking at a flow chart, which was labeled outreach methodology. And it was a workflow that told us that in that particular example, the first outreach event was a LinkedIn invitation with a message. If they added us as a contact, then we would send a longer LinkedIn message. That workflow could also forget LinkedIn and just work with an email if you have an email address at the beginning. Okay, so the outreach methodology, even I don't start with a call in the first instance. After I reach out with one written template or a second written template, if no response, that's usually when I jump into calling. So outreach is a combination of calls, emails, maybe text messages. If we had a database that included people's mobile numbers, right, then we would probably jump on it and take advantage of that. Okay, but let's concentrate on calling for a moment, because we already know from one of the answers this is the most hated thing. What do we hate about it? We hate it when we're on the receiving end. When do we hate it when we're on the receiving end? This is the point I would like to make. We hate it when it's irrelevant. So basically, you're having dinner in the evening and the phone rings and someone is trying to sell you a phone plan, but you already have a phone plan. And a phone plan is a commodity, basically. What is a commodity? It's basically something which is identical from vendor to vendor. It just depends. The decision is just which vendor am I going to reward with my business. But corn is corn, rice is rice, and phone plan is phone plan. It's all just the same thing. Okay? You can't tell the difference which phone provider provides this Wi-Fi that I'm using right now, right? Because it's a commodity. Okay? So that is the cold call that you have learned to hate. The one which is calling you at the wrong time to sell you something which is just not particularly interesting. The other thing I will add to that is that it was a call to a consumer. So keep that in mind as I am trying to build the case for cold calling in a B2B situation, okay? But in any case, there's all kinds of stereotypes regarding cold contact. And if someone came to you today and said, you should start making cold calls, then inside of your head, a lot of messages start bouncing around. And normally we don't hear them. You hear them because they're bouncing around in your head. And basically, these are the statements. I'm reading your mind right now, right? Because these are the statements in your head. I would never do that. Or I'm not made for it. A cold call? No, I would never do that. Or no, I'm not made for cold calling. So I would never do that kind of means like you have a moral reason not to do it. Or I'm not made for it might mean that you don't think you have a skill, or you are afraid of the consequences that are coming. For example, someone asks you, would you like to go on the roller coaster with me? The first hill in the roller coaster is about a 50-meter drop. You would say, no, I'm not made for that. Okay? I'm not made for it, sorry. I'm not made for it. My stomach can't take it, that 50-meter drop. Okay, so I think it would be interesting right now to have a quick discussion. Anyone who can actually unmute themselves, or to put something in the comment box. I'm going to list the reasons that that correspond with these two words. Sorry, I have to reach for a pen. I didn't get it before. Okay, I'm good. So I'm going to list the reasons that you can tell me that correspond with the word that. See the phrase, I would never do that? Tell me what that means beyond cold calling. Tell me what it is that you would never do. And the same thing for the word it. I'm not made for it. What's behind the word it? What is it that we're not made for? Could I hear from a few of you what is behind the words that and the word it? So we're talking cold calling. What is it that you would not do? Or what is it that you're not made for?
Okay, everyone should be able now to unmute themselves, so feel free.
Unless you love cold calling, guys. Then someone should do a live cold call for us right now to show us how much you love it, and so that we can all learn from your ability. Or if some of you are thinking, gosh, a cold call during this this workshop, certainly not. I would never do that. Now, tell me what that means. We can't hear anything.
And no one is typing also.
Or please tell me if you don't understand the question.
Hi, Phil. Sorry, I was typing, but I'm just going to say it.
Okay.
So I won't be doing the cold calling in my case, but the reason that I wouldn't do that is because I'm not made for disturbing people.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. So you would never disturb people. You can't see this, but I'm writing it down. Okay, someone else. Tell me another thing, like I would never disturb someone. What's another thing that you would never do or that you're not made for?
Svetlana is saying, afraid that people don't like.
Okay, great. So afraid of disliking you or disliking your product? What is it that they would not like?
Vladislav is saying, I don't have a problem with cold calling. I just don't know how to find the number to find the person in a higher chain of command.
Okay, good. Then we'll address that. Okay, going back to Svetlana, you're afraid they would not like what? Not like what? You or the product? Or is it another thing?
Svetlana is saying such situation.
Okay, afraid they would not like that you called, I guess. Okay.
And
So
Maria is also writing, maybe to push someone to talk about something that I want to sell. Some
okay.
people feel unpleasant doing that.
Okay, very good. So then you're not made for being pushy. So we have, I would never disturb people. I'm not made pushy. I'm not a pushy person. Okay, good. I'm afraid they may not like it. Okay. Give me a few more, guys, please.
Well, I also like if I'm doing this, I'm thinking like, how does it look for me? Even though I don't know this person that I'm talking to, I'm thinking like, what about my reputation? I don't want to be that guy, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not made for risking my reputation. Shall I say that?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. Okay, risking my reputation. Okay, what else, you guys? A few more, please.
Well, sometimes people can be very rude from the
Okay.
other side, so people don't want someone to yell to them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that.
Okay, all right, good. So I'm not made for being yelled at. So I'm not good with anger and screaming of people. Okay, great. One more, please, the last one, and then I will stop harassing you like a cold caller. Okay, so
maybe like I'm not made for explaining things on the spot very well.
okay. Oh, okay. All right, great. So explaining things on the spot, or thinking on the spot, right? Having to have the right answer on the spot. Okay, that's good. Okay, I guess in other conversations like this, then people are afraid of being irrelevant. So that guy that's selling the phone plan, you know, if you give that person any time, you're listening and it's irrelevant. It's like, yeah, what do I care? And it's can be humiliating to be calling thousands of people to describe something that you know is kind of irrelevant. You know the numbers are there. You can sign 1 out of 1,000 people into a new phone plan, but your heart is not in it. You know, it's not a very dignified message. Okay, so I'm glad we have that, and I have it listed here because what's our goal? Our goal is to find a way to cold call and not be any of these things, right? Not be the person that disturbs, not be the person that pushes, and not be the person that is irrelevant, right? Or avoiding the things we're afraid of. So avoiding that I'm ruining my reputation, or avoiding that someone will yell at me and be angry. Can we all agree that if the cold call eliminated all of these bad things, then we would all be happy to place cold calls? Maybe we can hear some yes or some thumbs up in the chat. The question is, if we can avoid all of this nastiness, are we happy to cold call?
There are some yes in the chat.
Okay, all right. So then how would you like for me to leave you with a formula that you can use to begin to avoid these issues? Okay, I'm going to assume that would be really cool. So let's go for it. Let me share a cold calling formula with you, which would take care of or avoid that you are disturbing, that you are pushy, that you are irrelevant, or protect you from angry yelling, or from ruining your reputation, or anything like that. Okay? It's a 4-part formula. So you already know that 4 parts are coming. Okay? So I'm also referring here to a conversation with the decision maker. Let's not worry for the moment about the gatekeeper, the receptionist. I will speak about that in a moment, but for now, forget the gatekeeper. Let's imagine that the decision maker answers the phone. So the formula is number 1, and this is in order, in chronological order. That means that point 2 comes after point 1, and nothing comes before the point we have right now. Your opening line is about whether you are interrupting. So we take care of probably the nastiest thing that could ruin our reputation to be considered someone who interrupts. Okay? So in my cold calling formula, that is the first statement I ask, am I interrupting anything? Just so you know, after this slide, I have a script that follows this formula. So you can save questions for the script in case you're asking, how exactly do I ask that? We'll see it in the next slide. Okay? Are you interrupting anything? Next, if you're not interrupting anything, introduce yourself. Okay? So introduction, you guys, it's not my product features. It's not my deal of the month, discount for this month. It's not a lot of things. It's the introduction. It is simple and to the point. So can someone tell me, in your estimation, what do we include in the introduction? What do we say during an introduction? What items are we introducing? Let's list the things that we introduce.
Probably saying our name and purpose.
Okay, your name. Okay, when you introduce yourself to the friend of a friend, you don't tell them your purpose in life. I'm here to save the world. No, you just say, this is my name. So not purpose, okay? Just your name, because you are an individual calling in the name of the company. Okay, so name is one thing. What's another thing we put into the introduction?
So we have more comments: who we are and why we calling, why we call, who we are, company, purpose of the call.
Yeah. Okay, then let's keep it simple, you guys. The introduction is really your name, your company name, because purpose for your call comes after you introduce yourself. So I think something I should mention here, which is you would not know if you are a new salesperson. So what I want to introduce here is, please have mercy on the people that you're calling. Have mercy means have some empathy for the people that you're calling, okay? Do not run over them with a train. The answers you're giving me show me already that immature approach where you are, I mentioned introduction, and you're already giving me an enormous speech, your mission, the reason for your call. Please have some mercy on people and tell them very little. Less is more at this stage. So introduction is your company name, your personal name, your company name, and your sales value proposition. We are helping X to do Y. Okay? So then the next point is the purpose of your call. And my question to you guys is, what is the purpose of the outreach sales stage? Because the purpose of the outreach sales stage is the purpose for the cold call. And should the purpose of your call, is the purpose of the sales stage something you should mention in the same words to the potential client? Yes. So you should be telling them the purpose of your sales stage number one. Okay, so what is the purpose of sales stage number one?
We have comments to get to discovery meeting, to get them interested.
Okay, I'm very proud of you guys. The purpose of sales stage one is to get to sales stage two. Let's say that closing the deal is sales stage 7. That is your objective as a salesperson, to close deals. But the purpose of sales stage 1, the goal is to get to sales stage 2. It's that simple. It makes it very simple for any salesperson to always look down on the ground and ask themselves, what is the number that I am standing on? If it's number 1, then what I need to concentrate my work on is getting to sales stage 2. Okay? So in this cold calling formula, the purpose of your call, in very transparent and very clear language for the person you're cold calling, is going to sound like the reason for my call is to arrange stage 2 with you. But you want to name what stage 2 is. So is stage 2 a deeper conversation? Then make that clear, perfectly clear, and this quickly in the cold call. Okay, the reason for my call is to set up an appointment when I can, so that we can speak about this in more detail. Okay, you guys, so if you say that the purpose for your call is to set up an appointment so that we can discuss this in more detail, discuss what? What have we said until now? Remember, we didn't discuss, you have not mentioned any special deals. You have not mentioned any product features. What's the only thing we can possibly build a discussion around? Something we mentioned in the introduction. What did we mention in the introduction?
We have comments, them, name and company, the SVP.
Perfect. then the only thing we can build a conversation around is whatever we have mentioned. And we have mentioned the sales value proposition. Okay? So before product features and all of this stuff that you run the risk of running over someone with a huge long speech about your product, the only thing you've offered is a value proposition, and the only thing you're proposing now is a deeper conversation based on the product, on the value proposition. So where do all the product features and things come out? In sales stage 2, during the deeper conversation. So this is working with the philosophy that you lead with your value. You don't lead with your product during outreach. It's tied to the whole philosophy that you build your product tailored to a pain point, a need, not you build a beautiful product and then force it on the market and hope there's some kind of pain point that goes with it. Okay? So the last part of the cold calling formula is have a next step. So next step is the answer to what are we doing next and when are we doing it? That you all agree what the event looks like that we have next and when is that going to happen. The purpose of your call, as you have explained it, is to set up stage 2. But it doesn't mean that the person you speak to is going to accept now to set up stage 2. You might have a different next step agreed between you. The reason that I like to propose the next step so early in the process, so as the third point of the cold calling formula, is because in reality, my opinion is that we are asking for a lot. We have cold called. We've cold called as a very decent human being, checking if we've interrupted first. We have also been very respectful that it is a call that is taking up their time. So we just quickly say our name, our company name, and our value proposition, nothing more. And then we propose having a longer discussion about this at a time that we can schedule. That's asking a lot. Already for a meeting, a deeper discussion, a calendar invitation that will come out of scheduling that meeting. So I expect the client to become defensive. Okay? So what does it look like in a conversation when someone is defensive? They will take 1 step back or 2 steps back. But I have declared the reference point, you guys. So what do I mean by the reference point? If I was doing a cold call that is maybe an immature cold call, the amateur salesperson, then someone answers the phone, I begin to speak about my product, and maybe my objective is to send them to get their email address so I can send them some information. Okay? So that's a reference point. If I was doing an amateur cold call with the goal of if I can only get their email address and send them an attachment with information, that would be a great success. If that's the reference point, then the client will be defensive in most cases in a cold call. And when a client is defensive, they take 1 step back or 2 steps back. So if what you have proposed is give me your email so I can send you some information, then the client takes a step back to what? What does it look like? 1 step back from the reference point of, please give me your email address so I can send you some information. What do you have if they take 1 step back?
Vladislav is saying, why would I give you my email address?
So what do you have? Nothing. You have nothing. That looks like a next step. Okay? But if the reference point is, here's my value proposition, let's have a profound discussion about it. So let's schedule this. and the client becomes defensive, then they take one step back to where? I'll help you guys. They take one step back to, it may sound like this. A deeper discussion? What, are you crazy? I don't even know much about your product. Tell me something about it now, so I understand if we should have this discussion. So the client thinks they are in control. They take one step back. They are being defensive, and they go to a place that it's beyond, let me send you an email, right? It is, let me then tell you something about the product now. That's an excellent place to be. That is beyond the goal of an amateur salesperson normally. If your client, maybe in anger, as I have displayed, in frustration says, a deeper discussion about what? Well, the question is about what? They asked a question about what? Now you have to answer it with additional detail. There's a lot of things I'm throwing at you, but let me throw another thing at you, because that's called a pull strategy. The moment the client asks you, what? Now you are delivering something they're pulling in, as opposed to the amateur, which is pushing a huge speech on someone. So we want to avoid people and rejecting us and not liking that we called and putting down the phone. Give them a push upon them an endless speech, and it's guaranteed that they will hang up on you because they don't even know where to breathe. You might have the perfectly prepared speech, but they may still not understand the first word because their mind was not ready to absorb it. But if you turn it into a pull strategy as quickly as you can, their mind will be absorbing what they think they're in control, so their mind is absorbing whatever they asked for. So that's just another thing to throw at you while I'm throwing a lot of things at you, okay? Just to kind of wrap the entire idea. What I was actually asking you before, what does one step back look like? If you're proposing a deeper discussion, one step back looks like, well, tell me a little bit now, which is a great place to be. If you propose a deeper discussion and the client even takes 2 steps back, 1 step back was pretty good. 2 steps back, as all the steps they take back are all bad news for us. But it wasn't even that bad news. That 1 step back was, well, tell me more before I even know what the meeting should be about. What does 2 steps back look like? If the client is being defensive and they take even 2 steps back, which is a big move, what place are you in?
Maria is saying, I'm not interested.
That would be 5 steps back. Let's take it by degrees, because the fact that we presented a reference point so far ahead, we're assuming that in being defensive, people are taking 1 or 2 steps back. They may take 5 steps back, okay? 2 steps back, guys, might look like a meeting about what? Well, I mean, I don't even know what about this is. Just send me an email and then we'll talk, okay? So 1 step back was tell me more about it now, which is pretty good. 2 steps back is send me an email. What was the reference point that an amateur salesperson sets to begin with? As I mentioned before, an amateur salesperson might come back to you and say, guess what? I got the email for the CEO. I can send them information. That was the ultimate best outcome that they could think of in their imagination. Here we're treating it like the 2 steps back scenario. So obviously, if you set the reference point high, then their defense mechanisms might take steps back still into a good place for you. Because if you show that you, let's say that you give up and you say, okay, that's fine, then let me have your email address so I can send you that email. You sound defeated, but you know inside your mind that that's a huge victory. to have gotten their information in order to send them information about your product. So their contact details in order to send them information about your product. Okay? But the point here is set up a next stage. If someone tells you, send me some information by email, and you agree to do that and you get the contact details, they think they have defeated you. So right now, no one is rushing to get off of the call. They would be rushing to get off of the call if you are on some kind of run-on statement, okay? So you might have the credit, there might be the goodwill for you to set up a next step based on what you have agreed to do. So if you have agreed to send a email with information to the potential client, what could you suggest as a next step? It doesn't have to be the sales stage. They already know that that's your objective, having a deeper discussion. But what could be an appropriate next step to suggest? If you have agreed, I can send you an email.
Next call.
Right, to follow up. So let me remind you, there is goodwill there because you allowed the client to feel that they were in control, but they weren't. Our formula kept it all under our control, but we let them feel that it was under their control. So there's some goodwill there. So it's a good moment they think they've defeated you. You said, okay, let me send you an email. And you can probably sneak in some kind of suggestion about calling them next week to see what questions they may have had regarding the email that you sent. So it's casual. It may not produce a date and a time. It may just produce the notion that Wednesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, and that might be good enough right now because we may not need to be pushier necessarily, okay? And that brings us into one of the points that we want to avoid. We want our cold call to seem pushy. We don't want our cold call to seem pushy. So it usually works in most cultures when you say, fine, let me send you an email. It usually works to find the wording that sounds like this. In English, you would say, so it's probably okay for me to call you, or you could also say, so how would that be if I called you next week just to get any feedback or any questions you may have based on the email that I sent you. So because it's casual enough, it's very rare, and here is where you have to trust me a little bit until you can practice this and see how true it is. In a B2B situation, people usually don't just hang up on you if you've treated the cold call with this approach. And if you make that casual suggestion about, it sounds like a courtesy call to see what feedback you may have or what questions you may have based on the information I'm going to send you. Usually people are nice enough to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, call me. Okay, so try this. The point here is less is more. If you try this formula, but you're adding more than what I have here, then you may end up saying this formula doesn't work, but you have to be honest of whether you are adding more than what's here really. The introduction is not more than name, value proposition. Purpose of your call is not more than stating I have a next sales stage, and setting up the next step is simply that, coming up with an action we can take in the future. Okay, so putting that into an actual script, which is the one that I operate with all the time. It's the script that I teach salespeople when I'm training them. I've labeled this as delivering the sales value proposition because that's what it is. The goal in the sales process is to take the sales value proposition, that was one of the main components of the sales process, and the direction that it takes is it goes to the decision maker at the company that fits your client definition. Okay, so that's why I've labeled this delivering the SVP. If it sounds like I'm making a big deal about this, it's because I'm still looking at your list of reasons why you would not do a cold call. So we're afraid that someone may not like the fact that we called. We're afraid that it's going to ruin our reputation. We're afraid that someone might be angry and yell at us because of it, okay? And our cold call is leading with the sales value proposition. So let me remind you, or let me ask you to see who remembers. Who are we calling within the organization? And how does that compare to the calls that someone places to consumers to sell them a phone plan? So who are we communicating the value proposition to, and how does that compare to the phone plan, the person that calls for a phone plan?
Vladislav is saying the most important decision maker for the topic we are interested in.
Correct. We're reaching out to the highest ranking officer for the topic that we deal in, for the relevant topic, okay? The point is, you guys, it's a relevant message. It's a relevant phone call every time. So that is already, that probably solves half of the problem, or more than half of the problem. If the message is not irrelevant, the message is not pushy, when it's the person who's in charge of that topic at the company. Let me paint a picture in your mind, okay? Imagine that you have the director of a particular department at a particular company, okay? And that director has a team of people that are assistants to the director inside of that department, okay? So whose salary is bigger? Who earns more money? The director of that department or the assistants of the director of that department? Who has the bigger salary?
Are you really asking it?
I'm really asking it. Does that surprise you? Who has the biggest salary and why?
Vladislav is saying director.
The director has the biggest salary and why?
Because he has the responsibility.
He has the responsibility also when things go wrong. Okay, keep that in mind. So now let's think about what can go wrong. That department perhaps depends on a few vendors. So you are a vendor. You have a solution, you have a product or a service, and it solves a pain point. And sometimes if that pain point is not resolved, it could mean the death of the company. It could be the death of the client if that pain point is not covered, okay? So the director of a department is responsible for that solution, having that solution and that the solution works well. Now, let's imagine that the department works with a vendor, and that probably is very familiar to a lot of you, that you're selling to clients that already have a vendor, okay? So let's say that the department that the director is responsible for has a vendor for a particular thing. And what happens if that vendor goes bankrupt overnight? All of their they haven't paid their server bill, so the server turns off their service, and now that vendor, you show up in the morning and the pain point is there because that vendor disappeared overnight. Then whose responsibility is it? It's the director's responsibility. And what would you expect the director to do? the morning that he realizes or she realizes that the vendor is gone?
Have a backup plan.
Perfect answer. Thank you. It's about the backup plan. Okay. So if the CEO goes to the director and says, hey, I heard that the vendor disappeared, but it's all under control, right? Oh, yeah, it's all under control. Okay, what's your plan? Well, you know, I'm going to start looking around to see who can replace this. Oh, really? You mean you don't have a backup? You need to start looking around. Okay, and how long is that going to take? Well, it's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks to find another vendor. The question is, why did you not have a plan B? Why did you not have a plan C? So the answer to why does the director have a bigger salary than his or her assistants is because they should have been spending the last 2 or 3 years of their career building the short list of replacement vendors. Okay, so the CEO who hears you don't have a backup plan, well, you realize that's going to eliminate half of our revenues for the next 3 weeks, but I can think of a way to make back those revenues. You're fired. So now I don't have to pay your salary and it's kind of equal to the revenues I'm going to lose because you didn't have a backup plan. That would be an appropriate reaction by the CEO, if you ask me, because that person who earns that salary didn't use it, didn't use their responsibility to have a short list of backup vendors. Okay, so now you come in, you guys. It's 2 years before the other vendor disappeared overnight. And that director of that department would take your call because it's their responsibility to hear your value proposition and say, oh yes, it is perfectly aligned. It is in accordance with the subject we deal with here. And it's my responsibility to know the environment, to know the vendors that are out there so that I can create my backup plan, plan B, plan C, and plan D, maybe even plan F. If they're a really good director, they would have all of these redundancy backup plans. And it would come down to a short list of vendors, and you have already spoken to them. You have already done the due diligence of what features are there and what features are not at that particular vendor. You would already have proposals in your hands to know what the cost is. That's what the backup plan would look like. You can turn it on today, and everything would run. Okay, so that vendor would take your cold call, guys. You see the point I'm trying to make? Maybe you need to shake out of your mind the idea that you're irrelevant. If you're speaking to the highest ranking officer for the relevant topic matter, then all you need to worry about is that your sales value proposition is clear so that they can make the connection. Oh, my department and that value prop, that's relevant. It's connected. So sometimes it's about shaking that idea that you are irrelevant because you were born irrelevant. No. Your value proposition positions you to be relevant for someone at each of the organizations that you're reaching out to, if that someone is responsible. There is a person responsible enough to keep a short list of vendors for the pain point that they need to take care of. Okay, so that brings up another point, you guys. Mentality for all of you. What do I mean by the mentality? That you should see success, you should consider it successful to have the opportunity to present, to introduce yourself and to present to all of the companies in your wish list. You don't need to close contracts to say, oh, I was successful. You would be successful if you had a way of knowing that you were on the short list of backup solutions at every one of the companies in the wish list. So the mentality is to not be disappointed, to not think it was a waste of time to present yourself to everyone in that wish list. See where I'm going with that? So we all want to close deals, and closing deals is critical to our existence, but it's not black and white. It's not lose and win. based on whether we close the deal. Because if winning means 18 months and 36-month sales cycles, and that 36-month sales cycle depends on a vendor going bankrupt and disappearing overnight, then it is what it is. But the 36-month sales cycle will never start until you start it. And it starts with the outreach. Okay, I hope all of that made sense, you guys. So what does the script look like that I use when I'm communicating the sales value proposition? It's following the formula, but now let's see what it looks like written out. So my opening line is, hello, this is Phil calling from Berlin, Germany. Am I interrupting anything? Because I'm not adding more than asking if I'm interrupting anything. Nothing about my product, not even my sales value proposition, that comes later. Okay? Certainly not the name of my company at this stage. Let's think that I have substituted the name of my company with something else in this opening line, maybe just because maybe my mind is wired in a way that I'm much too used to saying, my name is Phil from XYZ company. So I just need a replacement in my brain for XYZ company. So what have I replaced it with here? This is Phil calling from
Berlin.
Calling from Berlin, right. Maybe if only just a mechanism in order to replace the name of the company, if I'm wired that way, okay? So why would I avoid the name of the company? Why replace it with Berlin, Germany? That's where I'm based normally, guys. So why replace it with Berlin, Germany?
Well, because the introduction comes at a later stage.
The introduction comes at a later stage. In my opening line, you guys, that's correct. And then another reason is in my opening line, I don't want to say anything weird, anything that requires thought process. So the name of my startup, every startup has a weird name, and it's going to cause, what's the word? Friction, or it's going to cause work. You're going to make them work on whether they understood the name correctly. It might already be enough trouble to get them to understand your name, which is why I only wrote Phil here. My last name is Guijarro. Yeah, like that's easy to get on the first try. Sometimes what I do, guys, is to say my name is Phil Guijarro, so that I'm not really worried if they understood my last name. I just wanted them to understand where my first name ended and where the last name started. Because if I just say, hello, this is Phil Guijarro, what exactly was the first name? I mean, I'm the first one to admit, where exactly was the first name? Is it Philgi, because it's Phil Guijarro, or what exactly was it? It's a strange name for people, so I try to work with something in my opening line which is just understandable. Berlin, Germany, that does not create any comprehension problems, and that's what I want to avoid now in my opening line, so that they just concentrate on whether I'm interrupting. So quick question for all of you guys, or maybe if you still have a question, you're not in Berlin, Germany, so what should you say? It doesn't really matter what you say. You could say, I'm calling from Belgrade, Serbia, if that's your situation. And do not worry right now about what people think about Serbia or if they even know it exists. Just say it and you'll be fine. Okay? So how many answers are there to, am I interrupting anything?
2.
2. Or how many could there be if we stretch it? Let's say there could be 3, okay? 2, it's obvious. The 2 that are obvious is yes and no, right? Am I interrupting? Yes or no? Okay. What's the third one, you guys? Because now think about in real life, we may not get such a clean answer as yes or no. What would be the dirty answer, let's say?
Well, for example, to me, it happened that a guy said, "Well, not right now." So, like, I might be interrupting in a minute, basically.
Okay, all right, great. So let's call the middle one. You could call it whatever you want, the unpredictable answer or the dirty answer. We could even go as far to call it the angry answer. So in our list of reasons why we would not cold call is because people will get angry and yell at me. Why not control that? What if we build it into the script already? Then we might be in a more comfortable place. Okay, so what is this about? I tried to say it in an angry way, okay? Or the unpredictable answer could also be, you're not interrupting right now, but in a minute you would be. That could also fit right in here, the unpredictable answer. Okay, so we have no, we have yes, and what is this about? I don't appreciate that you disturb me, and I show you my anger. Well, what's this about? Okay, it's in our script, so it's all good. Okay, so then what happens if someone says, yes, you're interrupting? What's the good way to handle that?
Propose the next call.
Correct. The wrong answer, you guys, is to think that, oh, well, let me still squeeze my message. Nope. Still squeezing in your message would be the wrong thing to do here because you're proving yourself to be that vulgar salesperson that disrespects what people tell you. And that is one of the points we don't want to be. We don't want to be pushy. So yes, you're interrupting, then we're able to ask, when is a better time? And if you're lucky, maybe you can schedule. Oh, well, try me tomorrow morning. And you can ask them, okay, morning, would that be more like 10 in the morning or more like 11:30? Oh, try me at 10. And it may not be the most formal appointment, but you have 10 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So if it works very clean, then you may have an appointment, okay? What happens if someone gets frustrated because you ask them, when is a better time? They realize you're professional and respectful of their answer, but somehow they got frustrated and they didn't go into scheduling a time when you can call them back. What is the natural reaction you might get when you ask someone, when's a better time to speak about something you have no idea what it's about? They might just say, after you ask them, when is a better time? At that moment, they might ask, well, what is this about? Right? And then we're right back to the middle. So no and what is this about actually works in the exact same direction, because if someone asks you, what is this about? Then what are they asking for from our cold calling formula? The introduction. So am I interrupting anything? No. Then the introduction. Angry answer, what's this about? They're begging you to tell them what this is about, and it's the introduction. Okay, so far we're one-on-one with the formula from before. Okay, so what is this about? It's about name, company name, and sales value proposition. Okay, so as I was mentioning, I'm calling from Berlin, Germany, and a company called XYZ, where we are helping X to do Y. Okay, guys, so then what's the third part of the cold calling formula? Because that's coming up. The reason for my call. Okay, so the purpose of your call. We're trying to keep a script that is very lean so that people don't get frustrated. And what people need to know when you're cold calling them is, where is this going? If they can see light at the end of the tunnel, it's a much healthier call than when they cannot see light at the end of the tunnel. What does that expression mean, you guys? To see light at the end of the tunnel? What does it mean? A tunnel has a bit of a claustrophobic feeling, doesn't it? And when do you feel better? When you can see light at the end of the tunnel, or when you cannot see the end of the tunnel? What is more claustrophobic of the two?
The light
The
is
light.
less claustrophobic. Yeah.
When you're hitting people with an endless message about product and features, it's claustrophobic and they can't see where this is going. So point 3, stating the reason for your call, it shows people, and very quickly, because you are about 10 or 12 seconds into your cold call, you're declaring the reason for my call, and that alerts them that they're about to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're about to tell them where this is going, and their patience will be extended until you can finish telling them the reason for the call, as long as it's concentrating on that and not on product and features and price and junk like that. Okay, so then remind me what the reason for the call is, guys. Remind me. We're running out of time, so someone be quick. Sorry, go on.
Stage 2.
Correct. The reason for your call is to schedule stage 2. And now here's the question. To schedule stage 2 with whom? In the interest of time, I'll mention it. With the decision maker. However, do we know that this person is the decision maker?
We
in
do
the
not.
interest, you don't. Correct. So we researched them. We researched it really hard on LinkedIn, for example. We found the name of the person. We called the receptionist and we asked for that person by name. So this must be the decision maker, right? No, we have a hypothesis, but it's untested. So the reason for your call is to schedule the discovery call, stage 2, with the decision maker, but our hypothesis is untested now. This is the moment to make sure that your hypothesis is correct, and then you can schedule the next step with the decision maker. You have a 95% chance that it's the right person, okay? But your hypothesis is not tested. So it's the moment to do it. So one tactic that I'm going to recommend, now it's back to tactics. When you're selling something in a B2B environment, you should be honest with yourself. You could use the help of other people at every stage, at any stage. So if you're honest that you could use a lot of help in selling your product, then you would never hesitate to show that vulnerability, to show that weakness. Going back to the idea that the myth, the idea that I disagree with, that selling is about magic personalities and magic words, then you might also conclude, I have to always seem strong and invincible. I tell you, it's the entire opposite of that. Until now, I have been mentioning how there are no magic personalities, there are no magic words. It's all about a structured approach that controls all of the components we have spoken about, and it even comes down to the script, which is structured as well. So if you thought you have to seem strong and invincible, the last thing you would ever think of is to say, could you please help me? But the word help is like magic. There are no magic words, guys, but the word help is a trigger that can get you, that can help you get further. Forget the idea that it would make you seem weak and vulnerable. Use it to your advantage. So to finish up, and we can go into some questions and answers for anyone who wants to stay, then the reason for my call is to ask for your help in connecting with the person that is in charge of what? You have stated a sales value proposition in the form of we help X to do Y. Borrow that Y variable from your value proposition, which is even giving you a chance to reinforce your sales value proposition. Okay? I'm not going in a different direction from the cold calling formula. It's just that next step, the next stage has to be with the right person. So it's not on the screen, and I will repeat it for anyone who's taking notes. The reason for my call is to ask for your help in connecting with the person responsible for, or you could say in charge of, it needs to sound like the boss of the topic, okay? A person responsible for, and then the topic matter, which is inside of your value proposition. We're trying to get the person to say, that's me. And it's important to get the person to say, that's me. Because turning the page back to how would an amateur salesperson conduct the call? They would be product focused. They would have a long, endless speech. They never get around to really figuring out who are they speaking to, as if it's the client's responsibility to now do the work for me to get this sold, to extract from my speech everything which is relevant, and then have them say, oh, well then, help me in this way, you know, from everything you've said, I like that, give me that, you know. That's kind of a lazy approach if you expect someone to put that together for you. And who are you even speaking to? So usually in an amateur cold call, you go on this product focus approach. And one of the things that is involved in the defense strategy of the potential client is to leave you in the dark, leave you without information. And included in there is, who should I be speaking to? Okay. So here, in asking for their help, we've taken a step back from the notion that this might be a sales call, because you're asking for their help in connecting with the person who's responsible for a department. This could still be because I want some advice from them, or because I could use their feedback, or because some other reason completely. There's no guarantee that this cold call until now is meant to sell something. All you have mentioned is an introduction of yourself. So the reason for your call is to ask for their help in connecting with the person in charge of topic matter. We've set two traps here for the person we call to get us the answer that we need. On one end, we have set a trap in case the personality we're calling right now is reasonably empathetic. When you use the word help, you might wake up the empathetic sense in people, and they might help you with what you want. So on one end, we set a trap by saying, help me. And on the other end, we've set a trap for the egotists, because we've said, I was hoping for your help in connecting with the person in charge of, responsible for, blah, blah, blah. And they don't care about the help part. They're just going to take the bait, the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm the boss around here. And what have you gained? The knowledge that this is the person to target for now until the end of history. And normally, this is something you don't learn in a typical cold call, or sometimes not for the rest of the sales cycle. Until people ghost you, means that they go silent. And then you figure that you may or may never have actually reached the decision maker. Okay? So naturally, if someone says me, then you can propose the appointment for sales stage number 2. Okay, guys, so we're running out of time, just so that you know what was left for us to discuss, and then we can go into questions and answers. I also wanted to leave you with a notion of, how do I deal with receptionists? There was a question one of you asked, how do I find the phone numbers for those decision makers? And my answer to that is, you don't, and you don't care. Because you can find the phone number for the company and simply call the general number for the company and ask for someone by name. Because in our approach, we find the names of people, and then we call receptionists and ask to speak with those people. Receptionists can be complicated, which is why I have a formula for receptionists, which we can talk about if you guys want to. But first, considering that our time is up and I have more time, I can stay a little longer. Let's hear from the organizers. Where are we and where should we take it?
Oh, we have time if everyone are satisfied with that.
Okay. Any questions of what we have discussed so far or any objections? You disagree or something's not clear? How useful was the formula and the script, I wonder, as well. So maybe we can take a little feedback right now on how useful that approach and that script are. So any feedback, please, on the points we've seen so far.
Maria is writing, is there some difference in steps if you are selling service and not a product?
No. If it's service or product, it's still running on a sales value proposition. And there's still someone who needs to solve that pain inside of the organization. So generally, that's the answer. There's no difference between product and service. We can always sit down and talk about your particular situation. And that offer is real. I mean, just ask Vladimir or contact me directly and we can have a discussion about your case in particular, okay? Receptionists, you guys. How to deal with receptionists. If we are going to tell ourselves, who cares about the telephone for the decision maker, let's just call the company and ask to speak to someone by name, okay? So what I want to suggest is that there is a population of receptionists out there in the world, and this globe is the world. So it represents 100% of the population of receptionists. The science is not perfect on this. You probably are the first one to know that. I'm treating this as if half of the population were what I call robotic receptionists, followed by 25% of the population, which are checklist receptionists, and the last 25%, which are more than receptionists, okay? And you can see the slide, I assume, with the circle. Tell me if you don't, okay? So the tactic when dealing with receptionists is to work progressively from robotic into checklists into receptionist. Meaning that your approach begins assuming everyone is robotic, and the behavior that is contained in your approach progressively changes into, now let's treat it as if everyone was a checklist receptionist, and then your behavior progresses into the territory when you realize it's more than a receptionist, so my behavior is based on that. I am in that territory now. Think about a strategy that works counterclockwise. You know, clockwise is the hands on a clock that go in the direction. Here, think counterclockwise. Our approach begins as if the hand is going in counterclockwise direction, from robotic into checklist territory and into receptionist territory, more than receptionist territory. So what do these titles mean? What do you guys think I mean by robotic receptionists? What could that mean? Robotic behavior. What would you expect a robot to do? They are programmed, okay? And in this particular case, I'm assuming the program is simple, meaning that these people don't need much input. They just hear the name of the person you want to speak to, and they connect you. So the robotic receptionist I'm suggesting is one that you tell them the name of the person you want to speak to, and they say, I'll connect you. Is that really half of the population of receptionists? I think so, from experience. You may not know it because maybe you gave them too much information in your experience. So you never knew that it would have taken 10% of your effort to get connected. So what I mean by working counterclockwise, first behaving as if people are robotic and then moving into the other territory, is don't tell them more than what they need to know so that you can first see if the receptionist was robotic. So the robotic receptionist, all they need to hear is, hello, is John Smith in the office? So guys, if we say, good morning, my name is Phil, I'm calling from XYZ company. Can I please speak to John Smith? Is that more than the recommendation? How is that more than my recommendation? If the recommendation is to say, good morning, is John Smith in the office? Then how was the other example more than my recommendation? Anyone? You added the name of your company, but all you need to ask is for to speak with the person, John Smith, for example, by name. So your company name was irrelevant. You gave the receptionist more than he or she needed. The other thing, which is worse, you asked, can I please speak to John Smith? So what are my least favorite words in that statement? Please and can I. What's wrong with can I? I'm going to wait for an answer on this one. What's wrong with can I? And if the receptionist is robotic, what is wrong with can I? The recommendation is good
Answer
morning.
with yes and no.
Right. Yes, no questions are toxic. I believe that always. The other thing thank you for the answer. The other thing I dislike about it is that the robotic receptionist becomes a judge because you gave them too much information. They may have just been ready to connect you because they've connected 15 people before you and they're going to connect 45 more people during the day. They have so many phone calls that it's just, they wish people just told them the name so that they could just connect. But when you say, can I, they might become judge at the moment when they were not going to be the judge. It's like, can he? Maybe he shouldn't be calling. So you don't want to wake up the robot, okay? Just tell them the person you want to speak to. No, please. No, can I? But you don't want to be a vulgar cold caller, right? Your mom, your mother, your parents told you to say please because that's a courtesy. Well, let me challenge you because you did say good morning. Those are manners. That's a courtesy. And the courtesy is also that the robotic receptionist has these 60 calls to connect during the day. You're doing him or her a favor by not wasting more of their time. That's a courtesy too. So good morning. That's more than the manners that's enough manners for the phone, for this occasion. Good morning. Is John Smith available? Okay. So if they are not robotic, then you will notice it because the checklist receptionist has a checklist of maybe 3 or 4 questions. And you will hear the questions after you ask whether John Smith is in the office. What questions am I referring to? What's one example?
Who is asking for him?
Right. So hello, is John Smith in the office? If you don't hear, I'll connect you, then it wasn't a robotic receptionist. We hear the question, and who may I say is calling? Okay, so they've asked a question. Now we know they have a checklist of at least one question. Well, 2 questions. Number 1 is who do they want to speak to, but you took care of that one at the beginning. The next question is who's calling? If they have a third question, it might be what? What could be the third question on the checklist?
Why are you calling?
The reason for your call. Correct. Okay, so we have these questions, you guys, and that's what the checklist receptionist means. When I'm saying to work counterclockwise, and your behavior is first in the robotic territory, then in the checklist, the idea is that you never give them more than the answer to the question. So you answer the question directly. The rule number one is answer the question directly. So if the question is, who may I say is calling? Then what is the proper answer, you guys? A, my name is Phil Guijarro, or B, my name is Phil Guijarro from XYZ company. Which one is the concise, direct answer to the question that was asked?
Just the first name and surname.
Just the name, because the question is, who is calling? So who is not a company? Who is just your name? Then the next question could be, and are you calling from a company? So I'm not going to recommend that you say, yes, I am, and nothing else. I'm going to recommend that you say, yes, a company called XYZ. And then what is the reason for your call? Could be the next question. And have you spoken, actually before that, do you have an appointment? Could be the next question. And have you spoken before? Those are usually the checklist questions. So who's calling? What company? What's the reason? Do you have an appointment? And have you spoken before? Think about those checklist receptionists. And let me ask you a question, which is going to be very helpful so that you know how to answer those questions properly. Number one is answer it directly, but there's something more, okay? Why do they have the checklist? Remember, these are people with a job. They get 60 calls and they have to do something with the calls every day. What is the checklist for? Put yourself in their position on their training day, on day one. Why do they have the checklist?
To fill some form.
So I won't take more than 5 minutes of your time, and then this topic will be over. The checklist is there because the receptionist doesn't care about anything other than to do their job. And on day one, they said, your job is to make a proper introduction when you connect to John Smith. So now, if you hear that, if in your head you can hear the conversation between receptionist and John Smith, then you would know how to answer these questions, because you would want to give the receptionist the material to make a great introduction on the other end. So think about junk in, junk out. If your answers are junk, the introduction is junk. So when someone says, what's the reason for your call? Listen to the conversation at the other end. John, I have Phil on the call. He's calling from Berlin, Germany, and from a company called XYZ. He's got a really interesting offer that should be really relevant to you. If that's the introduction between receptionist and John Smith, he's got a really interesting idea that should be relevant to you. How good does that introduction sound? I think it sounds terrible. Who, if you were John Smith, would you be interested in taking a call, which is an interesting idea that should be relevant to you? No. So make sure the answers you give the receptionist are going to produce the best sounding introduction between receptionist and John Smith. So that's the mission, but it may still be difficult, right? So what is the reason for your call? What's a good answer for that? That's going to sound good in the introduction. Not special deal, not interesting proposal, not anything which sounds spammy, like an email which looks like spam. What I recommend is that in your mind, what is the reason for your call always translates into what is the topic. So the topic, remember, that is in your value proposition, the why variable. Okay, so if there's a pain point and you have named it in your value proposition, then everything here is structured, you guys. And I hope you see how it all comes together right now. The reason for my call is regarding pick the topic from the value proposition, which should probably sound like an encyclopedia topic, like a topic on a doctorate work or on a thesis, something dry, something thematic. Because remember, that person is in charge, is responsible for that dry theme, for that topic. They're not responsible for special deals and interesting proposals. They can't make the connection. But if the receptionist says, this is regarding the extraction of carbon particles from petroleum, and he's the person or she's the person in charge of extraction of carbon particles from petroleum, then at least we connect here. It's a relevant topic. Okay, what else do I have in the easy rules? Number 2, answer only the question. Okay, so I guess it's just the same thing. Answer directly and answer only the question. And, oh, that's it. It's just that simple. Okay, so it's just part 1 and part 2. Answer questions directly and answer only the questions. We have something called more than receptionists here. Before doing that, I just want to leave you also with this slide. Have a quick look at it, because it's not only about calls, it's also about templates, okay? So if you had a one template approach, it would sound a lot like your cold call. So have a quick look at that. And a 20-second explanation on what is the more than receptionist, which is over there in the 25% of the population. We saw that someone was not robotic. Then we started answering questions directly to see if this was just a checklist receptionist. But if now they get into a territory where it sounds like it all goes through me, then you know you are in the area which is more than a receptionist. So if you know that the person you're speaking to has this mentality that it all goes through me, then what should we ask her for? What should we ask him for? That receptionist, which is more than a receptionist, and it all goes through me. I am the judge of the quality of the inbound traffic. Then what could we ask that person to give us? So a topic we've already covered today. We would turn our behavior towards asking for their help. We would want to appeal to their empathy at that point. So again, look vulnerable, look needy, because you are vulnerable and needy, and you shouldn't be pretending that you are someone else. So guys, I've tried to put everything together, and at the end, if I have convinced you that the sales effort is engineered, it is made out of components, you need to sit down and perfect that value proposition, because look at how far it goes. It's for the checklist receptionist as well, you know. And if cold calling is intimidating, you feel it's not something you should do, if I've been able to convince you that through a structured approach we can avoid all of these bad stereotypes, then my mission is accomplished. But if you still think that sales is beyond you, it's a special skill, it's magic words and magic personalities, and I'll never be able to be that salesperson, then I have failed completely through this 3-part series. So 6-7 hours that I could have been golfing. So I know I'm way over budget here, so let me just turn it over to questions or to the administrator.
Okay, we have 2 questions. Vladislav is asking, what if she says that he is not in the office? Do we ask to get us with another person, or what?
I would recommend that you ask them for their help. You know, you could ask, okay, so if, let's say we're way over here in the robotic receptionist, the person's not in the office, then hit them with an open-ended question immediately. So, okay, thank you for your answer. When will the person be available? And then if instead of answering your question, they say, what is this about? You know what to do. Any questions which may come, we answer them directly. Okay, but if the person's not in the office, that's the answer. The question is, when will they be in the office?
Okay. On one of the previous webinars, you mentioned that you were talking about the sale process handbook. So Svetlana is asking, is there a possibility to send some, let's say, example of that handbook?
Yes, for sure. So I realize there's a lot of demand for that. Last time I was in Serbia, right now it's because of COVID, I'm not there. Otherwise, we would have met face to face. But last time I was in Serbia, there was a lot of demand for that. So I have been working on creating like a generic one that is good for a lot of audiences, and I'm still working on that. So when I have it ready, I'm giving it to Swiss EP, the organizers that brought me to here. And so I realize there's demand for that, and I'm interested in producing it and then sending it out to everyone. So you have reason to follow up with me.
Okay. As soon as we get, we will follow that. We will send
Great.
it to the participants. So
Okay.
is there any other question?
I actually wanted to ask, for example, when we're having a sales call and, for example, someone asks us like, can you call me back next month?
Mm-hmm.
And I read somewhere that like you should kind of be saying something like, well, you know, for example, John, maybe you don't want me calling next month because, you know, if this is relevant, what I'm talking about, then we would, you know, rather just, you know, scratch it off the list or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know if this is like, what do you think? Is this kind of too pushy? If is this something that will, you know, okay, so we're leading to the question to actually a person asking us, okay, what is this about? And then, you know, we have our whole you know, talk ready. But you know, what do you think? Would this be the right approach, or do you have maybe some other examples that would come in handy in these situations?
All right. So especially anything that someone else has written, you can't say right or wrong because there are differing opinions. But I think it brings us back to the decision is yours, because you decide how you want to expose your reputation. Remember, we want to manage the risk of a reputation. So you tell yourself that using that tactic you described just to make one push is acceptable still within your reputation. Anytime you hear an objection, I recommend to getting in the habit of counting the times you push back. So you push back once and you tell yourself, that's acceptable. I'm okay building a reputation where I show that I don't give up at the first try and I push once. Or you might tell yourself, I'm okay with a reputation where I push twice. Some people tell you, make sure that before you end the call, you have pushed 3 times. We're talking about pushiness. How do you want to seem to the client? That has to be your decision. So it's a great question because there's a lot to say. So the 3 push strategy, I think is okay. I think it's still safe. In my case, I count the cold call uniquely as the first push already. So the fact that we introduced ourselves, that to me is already push 1. And then if they say anything about why this can't be now, you could address the objection with an effort, and you could then make a second effort once they object again. Beyond 3 pushes, you are, I think, for sure going to be labeled as pushy. Okay. Because remember, the first push was even mild. It's just the fact that I'm introducing myself. So you decide if the damage is worth it, you know, in measuring the number of pushes. There was another really interesting point I wanted to make, and now it slipped my mind, and it's related to all of this. Maybe it comes back to me in the next few seconds, but we can also move on to the next question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, I would like to thank you all for participating. We will follow this webinar with email, with a link for the recordings if you were not present from the beginning, and also with an evaluation form. And also at the moment when we receive the handbook from Phil, we will forward it to you. So thank you
Okay.
once more.
And I remembered now, if I can say the thing
Yeah,
that I
sure.
forgot. So sense of urgency. I said the word before I forget it. Okay. So in related to this topic you asked me about, again, it's your decision how much you're going to push. But an element you can use is to create a sense of urgency. The reason why I need to speak to John now, as opposed to letting it be in 1 month. So the reason that you create, your best friend is when the reason is authentic. It makes your life a lot easier when you, and I hope the person that asked the question is still with us. Yes, yes, you are. I can see you.
Yeah.
So it helps you if the urgency is authentic. Sometimes you have an offer that is expiring. For example, really quickly, I'll give you the example of a client that I have in Berlin. Their sales team is constantly trying to reach professionals on LinkedIn because they have clients that are large consulting companies like Boston Consulting. And when these consulting companies want to begin a big important project for a big important client, they like to have preliminary conversations, 1-hour conversations quickly with people who are professionals in the industry, just to get like secondhand opinions, to get a full picture of how the industry clicks. Okay, so this client in Berlin uniquely is calling professionals on LinkedIn that are thematically related to try to arrange 1-hour phone calls between them and the consultants who want this preliminary research by speaking to professionals that are unrelated to their client and so on, but they're still in the industry. So those offers expire, meaning that the consulting company says, I want all of my calls achieved between now and the end of the week. And the team only has 4 or 5 days to do that. And if you call the expert and they say, and you ask them, am I interrupting anything? And they say, call me next week. Or if you explain the proposal to them and they say, I think I can do that next week, then you have a legitimate reason to bring up the sense of urgency. If there's a due date to the thing that you're proposing, then you can interrupt and say, thank you for the offer of following up in a month, but if I can point out one more thing, it's that the reason for my call contains a deadline. So it's real easy because it's the real story. Now, if you think I should think of a way to create urgency so that's what my second push looks like, it's a good push because it's based on the rational. It's not based on something vulgar, like it's my way or the highway. No, it's based on something rational. There's some kind of deadline or some kind of other reason. Then you would be in a very good place. If you have to make up the reason position, but you decide if your reputation is worth the risk, some of you will say yes, some of you will say no in lying when you're trying to create the sense of urgency. So that's an interesting topic to add to your question. So now I'm done.
Okay. Thank you all once more, and we will be in touch. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you guys. It was great speaking to you. And I hope to meet you in person next time around. I have met some of you in person, by the way, in previous occasions, but most of you not. All right. Have a good, what day is it today? Oh, have a good rest of the week.